Beyond words, our souls collide in the rhythm where dreams reside. Beyond words, we touch the sky.
Welcome to the Beyond Words Deep Dive Sessions, an inspiring exploration of the book Beyond Words by Marcia and John.
Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Yeah, excited for this one.
This time, we are diving into Beyond Words.
Oh, good choice.
This book is all about reframing.
Right, yeah.
That art of kind of,
Yeah.
shifting perspectives in a conversation to unlock understanding and get everyone on the same page.
It's like, when you're looking at something and you kind of just like swap out the lens, not that you're changing reality, but you're just seeing its different facets more clearly.
Okay. I love that analogy. But the book also mentions these mini-me's inside us. It sounds a bit out there. What's that all about?
So think of it this way. We all have different sides to our personality, right? So you have different communication styles. And so these mini-me's, some are more logical, some are more emotional, some crave connection, others independence. We all have them.
Yeah.
And they influence how we react in conversations.
Okay.
And so what Beyond Words suggests is that if you can recognize which mini-me is kind of activated in you and in the person that you're talking to, then you can kind of tailor your communication for smoother interactions.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like speaking the other person's language, even if it's not a literal language.
Precisely. It's about finding that common ground
Yeah.
and building that rapport by understanding really the underlying motivations that are driving someone's words and actions.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But how do we actually, reframe something in a conversation? I know the book gives that example of someone being like, I'm just not a good public speaker.
Yes, and that's a fixed mindset.
Yeah.
And that can really be a roadblock for people.
Right.
And so the book suggests reframing it by saying, you are a good public speaker. You just haven't found a way to feel comfortable doing it yet. And so it's that subtle shift that transforms this perceived limitation into a challenge that can be overcome.
So we're shifting from a focus on fixed traits to like a more positive
Yeah.
and empowering perspective. But isn't that a bit like, I don't know, like putting words in their mouth?
Yeah, and that's where the art of reframing comes in.
Okay.
It's not about you dictating what someone should think, but it's about offering a new lens through which they can view the situation. Remember those frames we talked about earlier?
Sure.
Like, imagine them as those picture frames that you have on a wall. Reframing is about kind of gently adjusting those frames, not replacing the picture itself.
Okay. So I'm starting to see how this works. It's about subtly guiding the conversation, not forcing it. But what about those times when someone is stuck in like a really negative headspace? Can reframing really help then?
It certainly can.
Okay.
And Beyond Words argues that reframing, it isn't about sugarcoating reality, but it's about finding a more empowering and productive way to approach it.
Okay. So instead of dwelling on the problems, we're looking for the solutions or opportunities for growth.
Exactly. For instance, imagine someone's complaining about being stuck in traffic.
Right. It happens all the time.
A skilled reframer might say something like, hey, at least you have some time to yourself to listen to that podcast you love. So you're acknowledging the inconvenience, but you're shifting the focus to something more positive.
That's really interesting. It's like you're reframing negativity into something more constructive.
Yeah.
But how do we actually become like skilled reframers?
Right.
Like the book mentions specific techniques, right?
Absolutely. And one of the most fundamental ones is active listening.
Right. Because you can't really reframe something if you haven't like truly heard and understood the other person's perspective.
Exactly. It's not just about waiting for your turn to speak. It's
Yeah.
about genuinely seeking to understand their frames and what is behind them.
Okay.
And so Beyond Words emphasizes asking open-ended questions to encourage the other person to elaborate on their thoughts and feelings.
So instead of leading them down a specific path with like yes or no questions, we're giving them the space to like reveal their own thought process.
Precisely. And the book gives this great example of a coaching conversation where one person uses open-ended questions to help the other person reframe their approach to marketing strategy.
Oh, tell me more about that. What happened?
Well, one person, let's call him Alex, he was really attached to these old school marketing methods.
Okay.
And the other person, Blake, could have easily shut down these ideas, but instead she asked very thoughtful questions. That prompted Alex to consider the changing marketing landscape.
So he was subtly guiding him towards a new perspective.
Right.
Without directly challenging his existing beliefs.
Exactly. And through that gentle reframing, Alex arrived at the realization that a blended approach might be more effective all on his own.
Wow, that's so cool.
He even got excited about exploring these new digital strategies
Yeah.
that he hadn't even considered before.
That's amazing. Just by asking the right questions. He helped him reframe his entire approach
It's powerful stuff.
to marketing. That makes me wonder, are there other techniques for effective reframing that go beyond just like asking questions?
There are, and this is where things get really fascinating. Beyond Words dives deep into the power of metaphors. And storytelling is incredibly potent reframing tools.
Metaphors and storytelling. Those are powerful tools in so many areas of life, especially in communication. I'm hooked. Tell me how they work in the context of reframing.
Remember that story we mentioned earlier from Beyond Words about the author's daughter hiking in Romania?
Oh, yeah.
And her friend wore running shoes, so she had outrun wolves if they encountered any.
Yeah, that one cracked me up. But also, yikes, who thinks they can outrun a wolf?
Right. It's a memorable story for sure. But the point isn't about footwear choices or outrunning predators. It's a metaphor for being prepared with the right tools for any situation.
Okay, I see that now. But how does telling a story like that actually reframe anything?
Well, stories, and especially those with vivid metaphors, they engage our brains differently than just like presenting facts or logic. They kind of slip past our mental defenses and they tap into our emotions, making the message so much more impactful and memorable.
Interesting. So it's like those aha moments you get from a great story, where
Yeah.
suddenly you see things in a new light.
That's exactly it. Metaphors act as bridges. Between the familiar and the unfamiliar, they help us to grasp complex concepts or shift perspectives by relating them back to something we already understand. Like in that story, the running shoes become a metaphor for any kind of preparation or resourcefulness.
Okay, this is really making you realize how powerful stories are. It's not just entertainment, it's like literally rewiring our brains. Speaking of which, the book mentioned that reframing can actually activate different parts of the brain. I'm curious to know more about like the science behind that.
It's true. Beyond Words connects this idea of reframing to the fascinating world of neuroscience.
Okay.
And it explains the different parts of our brains handle different functions. And reframing can actually stimulate those various areas.
So walk me through it. What's going on in our heads when we're in the middle of reframing or being reframed?
Well, you have the left hemisphere,
Mhm.
which is the analytical, logical, detail-oriented side. Think of it as like the list maker, the fact checker, lover of linear thinking. And then you have the right hemisphere, which is more holistic, intuitive, big picture focused. That's where your creativity, empathy, emotional intelligence come into play.
Oh, interesting. So are you saying that some people are more left-brained and others are more right-brained? Like, is one side always dominant?
Yeah, it's a common way to describe those tendencies, and understanding them can be really helpful for communication.
Right.
But what's truly fascinating is that we're not stuck in one mode.
Okay.
We can actually learn to activate different parts of our brain intentionally, even the ones that we don't use as often.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And that's where reframing comes in.
Precisely. By using techniques that we've been discussing, like metaphors, storytelling, asking open-ended questions, we can actually engage the right hemisphere, even in people who might be more comfortable in that logical left brain mode.
So it's like we're giving their brains a workout, helping them build new connections and access a different way of thinking.
You got it. And the more we practice reframing, the easier it becomes to access those different parts of our brains. And this leads to more flexible thinking, creative problem solving, and even more meaningful connections.
Wow. So it's not just about navigating a single conversation. It's about building
Yeah.
lasting, positive changes in our brains. This is incredible. But it also seems like a lot to keep in mind. Like while we're talking to someone, are there any simple practical tips from Beyond Words that we can use to start reframing our communication, like without getting overwhelmed?
Absolutely. One of the easiest yet most effective tips is to simply pay attention to the words you're using.
Okay.
Our language has such a powerful effect on our thoughts and how others perceive us.
Okay, so you mean like choosing our words more intentionally.
Exactly. Beyond Words encourages us to kind of swap out negative or limiting language for more positive or neutral alternatives.
So instead of saying, that's a problem, we might say, what's a possible solution here? Let's figure this out.
Precisely. Or instead of getting stuck in, it's impossible, try shifting to, let's explore other options.
Right.
These might seem like small tweaks to our vocabulary, but they can make a world of difference in how we approach a situation and how others respond to us.
Yeah, you're right. Even just hearing you say those things makes me feel more optimistic. and solution-focused. This is really resonating with me. Are there any other, like, simple reframing techniques that we can try out?
Absolutely. Remember, reframing is about shifting perspectives, even in seemingly insignificant situations. So next time you're tempted to complain about something, like the store being out of your favorite item, the weather, traffic, whatever it might be, try reframing it. Could this be an opportunity to try something new, to enjoy a moment of peace, to practice patience?
Okay, that's a challenge I can get behind. It's like looking for the silver lining in every cloud.
Yeah.
I like it. This is all starting to click. But before we wrap up, I have one more question about something that was mentioned in the source material. It said that the author often starts his presentations with a story. Why is that, do you think?
That's a great observation, and it goes back to what we were discussing earlier, about how our brains are wired for storytelling.
Right.
By starting with a story, especially one that's rich in metaphors. He's immediately capturing the audience's attention and creating a framework for understanding the information to come.
So instead of just launching into a lecture about reframing, he's easing people in
Yeah.
with like a relatable experience or analogy. Think about it.
Which is more likely to stick with you. A list of facts about reframing, or a vivid story about someone successful using it in a challenging situation.
Definitely the story.
Yeah.
Stories make the information come alive, and they help us see the relevance to our own lives.
Right. And because stories kind of bypass our logical filters and connect with us on an emotional level, we're much more likely to internalize the message and remember it later.
That makes sense. Wow, this has been an incredibly eye-opening dive into the world of reframing. We've covered so much ground, from the psychology and neuroscience behind it to practical tips and techniques that we can all start using today.
Yeah, I'm feeling inspired to approach my communication in a whole new way. Me too. It's amazing how these subtle shifts in perspective can have such a profound impact on our interactions and our overall well-being.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into Beyond Words. Remember, the journey of reframing is ongoing. Be kind to yourself, be patient with others, and keep practicing those reframing techniques. You might be surprised by the positive ripple effects they create. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the power of human connection. So we've talked about the why of reframing, the brain science behind it. Now, let's get practical. For our listeners, what are some takeaways from Beyond Words that they can use, like right now, today?
We've touched on some already, but the big one, and it's really the foundation, is active listening.
Right, because you can't really reframe something if you haven't actually listened to what the other person is saying.
Exactly. It's more than just, waiting for your turn to talk. You have to genuinely try to see things from their perspective, understand their frames, like the book talks about.
It's like that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Active listening is how we show we care.
Absolutely. Be present. Ask questions to be sure you understand, and don't jump in with solutions before you've really heard them out.
It's about making sure they feel heard, which, let's be honest, we all want that.
For sure. And as we get better at listening, we can start to pick up on those little phrases, in ourselves even, that might be holding us back. Beyond Words has tons of examples of how just changing a word or two can make a huge difference.
Right, like saying challenge instead of problem, or let's explore some options instead of it's impossible. It seems so basic, but I can see how it changes the whole tone.
100%. And this leads to another tip. Don't wait for a big argument to try this out. Use reframing every day, even for little things.
Building that mental muscle.
Yeah. It's about making it a habit. So next time you're, stuck in line at the store, try to see it as a chance to practice patience.
Or finally call that friend you've been meaning to catch up with.
There you go. And remember, it's not about pretending everything's perfect. It's about looking for the good, the lesson, even when things are tough.
This has been amazing. I feel like I have a whole new way of looking at communication now.
Me too. It's wild how a book like Beyond Words can shift your whole perspective.
For sure. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into Beyond Words. Keep being curious, keep learning, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the power of communication.
Thank you for listening. Give us a like and share your comments. Order the book via the link in the comments. Stay tuned for more.
Beyond words, our souls collide.